Welcome to the Grad School Sucks podcast, where we believe that your life and career after grad school should rock. I'm your host, Matt Carlson, and today we're doing something a little bit different. Today, or at least the day this episode drops, is Thanksgiving, and I know many people are traveling and visiting friends and family this week, and you do not want this podcast to be a distraction from that time. So for today's episode, here's what I've got prepared. I have a couple things that I want to say, so I'm going to monologue for a few minutes, and then for the rest of the episode, I'll drop an interview that's already been released, but is one that I think still carries a lot of weight for grad students today. So, here are the things that I wanted to share. Number 1, gratitude. I am grateful that you are listening. I know that grad school is stressful. I know that you're always pressed for time as a grad student. I know that you don't get to do all the things that you want to do because you're juggling everything that comes along with being a grad student. There's classes, doing research, maybe you have an assistantship, you've probably got some unpaid labor that you're doing. There's also extras like applying to grants and looking for jobs. I know you've got a lot going on, and I'm grateful that you choose to use some of your limited free time to listen to this podcast. And I sincerely hope that the episodes that you listen to serve their intended purpose, which is to expose you to career paths that you hadn't considered before and shed light on how you too can build an awesome career for yourself after you leave grad school behind. Which leads me to my second point. Number 2, what is this podcast all about and where is it going? I honestly had the itch to start this podcast about 2 years ago, but I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I didn't know what the format was going to be. I didn't know what I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to have a podcast. And now that I've spent a bit more time distancing myself from academia and getting deeper into my current career and industry, I think that the focus I was searching for years ago has really taken hold in my mind. This podcast is about connecting you to your future profession, your future career path, potentially even your future colleagues. I want to give you what I didn't have, which is a group of informal mentors who can tell you what it's like on the other side after you graduate from grad school, and how not to just get a job, but how to thrive in a career. I want this podcast to answer the question, what the hell am I going to do with my life after grad school? When I first started doing this podcast, I told myself that I would do 10 episodes and then reevaluate if it was worth continuing. And I defined worth continuing as A, I like doing it, and B, it provides value. And honestly, I've loved doing it. As odd as it sounds, interviewing former grad students about their career paths satisfies the ex-therapist part of me that loved talking to people and learning about their lives and helping others. And I do really enjoy it, and I want to keep doing it. And I hope that the past 10 episodes have provided the value that you were looking for, which leads me to my third and last point. I want to share a review that someone left for this podcast on the Apple Podcast app. So the title of this review is Meaningful Content and Down to Earth. Here's what they put. I love Matt's or Dr. Carlson's podcast. It's filling a gap that I didn't even know I had following graduate school. I wish I'd had it when I was a student. Matt is warm, charming, and for a quant researcher, he's incredibly talented at the interview methodology. Winky face. Highly, highly recommend all grad students and hopeful grad students listen in. We all need to know the real stories of what happens after the cap. The cap, of course, referring to the cap and gown for graduation. So I'm pretty sure I know who left this review. It's likely Dr. Savannah Young, who I interviewed in episode 5. Because she's my friend, I feel like it's a little bit cheating for her to leave me a 5-star written review, but honestly, I love it. And I think the reason I love it is because it gets to the question of, am I providing value? If I am providing value, the way that you can let me know is by leaving a rating or review. If you've found any value in the last 10 episodes of this podcast, I humbly ask that you consider pausing this episode and leaving a rating or review. If you have the Apple Podcast app, you can leave both a rating and a written review. If you have the Spotify app, you can leave a rating. And if you're one of the 10 people who are listening on YouTube, you can leave a thumbs up on this video. And if you've not found any value from this podcast, please send me a message on Instagram at gradschoolsucks and let me know what would bring you value. I'm not saying I'll necessarily be able to provide whatever it is that you're looking for, but I want to know what it is regardless. And for the folks who are bold enough to leave both a rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts, I will read your review on the show in the future, especially if it makes me laugh. All right, let's start wrapping things up. So in summary, we talked about how grateful I am that you spend your limited free time listening to this podcast. Honestly, I'm honored, and I hope it's providing you the right kind of value. We talked about the purpose of this podcast, which is to answer the question, what the hell am I going to do with my life after grad school? And lastly, I asked that if you are grateful for this podcast, please consider pausing this episode right now and leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you leave a written review on Apple Podcasts, I will read it on air, especially if it makes me laugh. To conclude this wandering monologue, I want to remind you that I originally told myself that I'd do 10 episodes and then reevaluate. Well, here we are at episode 11, and I'm happy to say that this ship is going to keep sailing. I've already got a month's worth of recorded interviews ready to go, and I still have more scheduled. That being said, I am always looking for more former grad students with exciting careers that I can interview for the show. If you know of someone who should be interviewed for this podcast, even if that's you, hit me up on Instagram at gradschoolsucks and tell me. And without further ado, let's get to today's interview, which is the very first interview that I did for this podcast with my good friend, Dr. Ali DeGraff. See you all next time.
I had to do something different, or I was already on a spiral of like depression and anxiety. I was taking anxiety meds, like antidepressants. I could not keep doing it.
Welcome to the Grad School Sucks podcast, where we believe that your career after grad school should rock. I'm your host, Matt Carlson, and today I'm talking with my good friend, Dr. Ali DeGraff, about how she ran away from academia, climbed the corporate ladder, and now runs her own private practice. Other topics we talked about include how she was the first person in her family who went to college, let alone grad school. We talked about how she broke some taboos in academia that ended up benefiting her career path and why she shifted from corporate life to being self-employed. And as always, we talked about what current grad students should be doing and thinking about in order to maximize their future career potential. Without further ado, let's start the interview. Thank you for joining me, Ali. I think you've got a super rich story. I do know some of it. I don't know all of it. I'm excited to learn more about it. I think the first question that I wanted to ask was, what brought you to grad school, or what were the things that kind of pushed you or drew you into grad school?
Yeah. Well, hi. Thanks for asking me to join you. I'm very excited for this, and kind of weird being one of the first, but excited to see where you take it because you're brilliant, and I know it'll be really good. So what brought me to grad school? So I was a first generation college student, and I was an undergrad out at Texas Tech University because it was like the furthest university away from my family, but it was still safe because I had like some extended family in Lubbock. So it's not like I didn't have the traditional path to college. I transferred in from a community college and had no idea what I was doing. So I'm nearing my graduation date, and I have one of my professors approach me and say, hey, you should consider going to grad school for marriage and family therapy because my undergraduate degree was in like community services, essentially this cousin of social work. And I wanted to just work in a nonprofit agency and feel good about myself. And I remember telling my teacher, like, why would I go to grad school? Like, I'm about to finish. Like, why do I want to start college over again? And I had no concept of what graduate school was. So he like sat me down and introduced me to some grad students, and he was like, you could be a therapist and blah, blah, blah. And so I didn't have a plan. Actually, a funny story. I got engaged to some dude right before I was supposed to graduate because I thought that's what I was supposed to do, which I think is a running theme in my story. As the story unfolds, you'll find it. So yeah, graduated, ended up going to grad school, obviously didn't get married.
And so
I
why?
did, yeah.
Sorry, why therapy specifically?
Well, I have this conversation a lot, actually. Like, no one ever sat me down and said, you can major in whatever you want to major in. It was just kind of like, I knew I wanted to work in the mental health / social services field. But my professors in undergrad were all of the professors in the graduate program, right? And so that was just kind of where they led me. They never said like, oh, Texas Tech also has a counseling degree and a social work degree. It was just kind of like, our college has marriage and family therapy. You should do it. And so it was never like a intentional decision. It was kind of like, and I didn't know what I was going to do after I graduated college. Like I didn't have a job or anything lined up. So I was like, fuck it. Like, I'll just keep going to school. I'm really good at this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I graduated with cum laude or whatever the honors are, and I was really good at college and I liked it. So I thought, whatever, I'll do another 2 years of it. And I joke about like, when you're in high school, you're kind of in the top 10%, and then college, you're around other people, you're also maybe in the top 10%. Grad school is all the other people that were in the top 10%.
Yeah.
So maybe I was in like the top 50% in my master's program. I get to my PhD and I'm like the bottom 1% or something.
No, that's not true.
Smartness. So yeah, I went to grad school and I really liked it. And I met PhD students and I thought that I wanted to be like them, work in
just
academia.
To clarify, you went to a master's program for marriage and family therapy. Is that what it's called there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
At Texas Tech.
Yeah, at Texas Tech. Graduated. Pretty early in my master's program, I convinced myself I wanted to do a PhD because all the PhD students, I just looked up to them. I thought they were so smart. I wanted to be like them. I loved my teachers. I never thought I wanted to teach. And in my PhD, we had to learn how to be teachers. And I just loved that part of it. So pretty early in my master's, I knew I wanted to do a PhD. And so I set myself up. My master's program was not a thesis program. It was a clinical program. So I opted to do a thesis to improve my chances at going to a PhD program.
Like a research
and in our
thesis?
A research thesis. It was, when I look back on it, it's so embarrassing. Like, don't Google it. It's cringy.
We'll throw it up on the screen right here.
Yeah. I loved it. I loved it so much. And the tech program, it was very clinical focused, not super research focused. And so I didn't really know what research was. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. My thesis was cute. Is it like exploratory factor analysis? So, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I knew I wanted to do a PhD. So yeah, I did a thesis, graduated through my application to a few different schools and got accepted to a couple, and decided a tech accepted me to their PhD program, but I decided that I wanted some diversity in there. So I ended up going to Georgia, where I met awesome Dr. Carlson.
Yeah. And we I think we met first in Lubbock. Is that right?
Yep.
Because
Yeah, we were
yeah,
interviewing.
that's right. Because I interviewed for that PhD program as well. Um, and then was it like the next week or 2 weeks later we were in Athens interviewing there?
Yep, that's
Yeah.
right. Um, yeah, I think you wanted to work with my thesis advisor.
I was
Um,
considering it, yeah. I thought he was a cool
yeah,
dude. I wasn't really
yeah,
professionally oriented on like what my research was going to be about, but
yeah. He is a cool dude. If he's listening, hello. You're a cool dude. But yeah, we met back then at Tech, and I was like Lubbock, and you were like Lubbock. And you were like, oh, Lubbock. um, I love Lubbock. Like I said, I have family there, but I needed to. I told myself that it isn't. You shouldn't have a degree from the same 3 degrees from the same institution. It's not very
mm,
marketable. And had I not had that assumption, I probably would have stayed at Tech because I really loved the people there. But in many ways, like it was really good for me to get out of there too. It was safe for me, and I needed to kind of be outside of my comfort zone. So
yeah.
fast forward the next fall, I'm in Athens. I didn't even take a break. I graduated in August. Didn't even go to my graduation because I had to start school in
I didn't know that.
Athens.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And we started, that was August of 2013.
Hmm.
Does that sound right? Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
Can't believe that's almost 10 years ago.
That's almost 10 years ago. Wow. So yeah, I
Yeah.
went to grad. I did not do my PhD in the professional way, or the traditional way. I did. I only lived there for 2.5 years, if you remember. So
Yeah.
I took like 12, 15, 18 credit hours every semester to get done with the classwork, that's how I got through my master's and my undergrad program too. I just, full time plus some hours. So I
And
did
yeah,
all of my,
sorry,
yeah,
just to jump in to give people perspective.
yeah,
MFTs, Marriage Family Therapists, we do the 2 years in the master's program, and then we had 3 years of coursework. Was that
yeah,
for the normal speed,
yeah,
and then 1 year of internship and 1 year for dissertation? So it was a 5 year program, projected
yeah,
to be a 5 year program. Is that
yeah.
right?
I think that's right. And like some people, depending on, your data collection for your dissertation or your internship, some people took anywhere between like 5 and 7 years. I think ultimately it took me 7, 13. I graduated in 2019. So yeah, 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, it took me almost 6.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I hurried up and did all of my coursework in 2.5 years. Um, if it's not obvious, I hated it. It was awful for a lot of reasons that we can unpack. But yeah, finished up my coursework, was not tied to Athens, and bounced quickly to Austin, which is where I always knew I wanted to be.
Could
I
we
worked in a lab. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, could we just
Back me
slow
up.
down for that one part? So,
Yeah.
in going from the master's program to the PhD program, what like expectations did you have that weren't, quite the same? What were some of the, overarching things that made you want to kind of speed through the program? How did
Yeah.
you see your view of your future career shifting through those first few years of the PhD? Anything
Hmm.
like that?
Yeah. Um, I was actually really, really excited to move to Georgia and be in that program. Um, I think I had some really high expectations and maybe had romanticized what a PhD was. Um, I loved the classes for the most part. Like I love discussing things with people that thought differently than me. I loved learning. I was just talking about this recently. I really loved studying philosophy, like
Hmm.
getting into the differences between philosophy and theory and epistemology and ontology. Like I fucking loved those words, and I loved reading about them, and I spent so much time thinking, and that was really new for me because for so long culturally in my family, education was like learning facts and being able to spit out knowledge. And so just to have the freedom to think, I loved that. And that did meet my expectations to some extent. But what I didn't realize is that that's there's like this on one hand, people are like, think creatively and be a philosopher and, whatever. And then on the other hand, it's implicit is that if you don't think like us or do like we do, not cool. And for me, the experience was like, I didn't fit in. So I think for me, that was kind of the first experience in the PhD where I realized like, we had someone in our cohort that used to say like, it's playing a game. It's like, that you're in the matrix and be in the matrix and live in, like, I didn't know how to be in the matrix. And in retrospect, I have friends telling me like, yeah, you didn't come from a family of highly educated people and like academics. So of course you didn't fit in. Like,
So is
yeah.
this like not fitting in? Is this about like the politics in academia or like the careerism in academia or something else or a mixture of things?
Yeah, I think it was the politics, and I guess there was just like a disconnect or incongruencies where like I saw myself as a student, and in PhD programs, just to situate it a little bit, like you're a student, but for a lot of us, we had like assistantships, which means you get a job. So you're also like kind of obligated to work for the university as an instructor of an undergraduate class or a research assistant or teaching assistant or research assistant. So I had this essentially like work study job my first year where I was a teaching assistant for my major professor. And then my second year, I went into this research assistant lab where we worked together. And so I like, on one hand, I was having this experience of like, I'm a student and a part-time worker. But I'm also like a free thinker and, let me do what I want to do. I'm also just a really defiant kind of person. And so my parents lived in North Florida. I wanted to go home on the weekends and spend time with them because I had been in Lubbock for the last, I don't know, long time, many, many years. And so I was a road trip away, which was new. So I wanted to go home. I wanted to spend time with my family. At that time, my family was going through some stuff. Like my dad has lost his job and like just some hard stuff was going on there. So I wanted to be there. And this, I don't know, this like is a symbolic representation of the experience for me. I'm not obligated to this university or this program outside of my, coursework and the 20 hours a week I had to put in for my job. And one of my professors told me like, when are you going to realize you can't go home on the weekends? And like, you're going to have to choose which is important or where you want to spend your time. And that was like the first kind of symbolic memory for me that I was just like, why not? Like, why do I have to have this be my entire life? So yeah, is it political stuff? Yes. I think for me, it was like just cultural differences too, that did not line up. Yeah. I went down a rabbit hole, so I don't know where I'm going anymore, but yeah.
No, that was great. And I mean, I feel like, especially with the, like you were saying, that moment, the symbolic moment, it's, to me, I hear it in terms of like, are you bought into the cult? Because you're taking actions that show that you're not bought into the cult. And that can impact our view of you. And, I never heard, I should be careful about what I say. I never heard anything about you. I heard stuff about other students from professors all the time that give me the indication that there is this stream of communication behind students'
Mm-hmm.
back of professors just being like, this person's not serious, or this person should be disregarded, or, we're
Mm-hmm.
not going to support this student anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I call it cult. It could, probably a lot of terms
I
would
like
fit,
that word.
but
No, that feels like a very accurate description. Like, and another one of the kind of expectations that I had that I guess wasn't met, and maybe this is a bit hypocritical because whatever, I'm saying that didn't want to be, it to be 100% of my life, but so I had, we did percentage of assistantships, right? So if you had a 50% assistantship, it covered an X amount of your tuition and you got a stipend. If you had, I started off with the lowest level of assistantship, which I think was like 10% or 10 hours or something. I can't remember. I blacked it out of my mind. But I went to our graduate coordinator and I was like, I need more help than this. Like, I'm willing to work, I'm willing to do more, but I'm going to have to fucking drop out. Like, I don't come from money. I'm like funding this myself. I need more work if you want me to, if you want to help me out, which I thought there would be a response to that. And it was like radio silence, right? And so it wasn't ever said to you, but it definitely felt like I was probably one of those students that were like, she's not really serious about this, or she doesn't really, fit in, or I don't know what it is. So yeah, I was like, Matt, I was like bartending my first year, trying to like make it work, which also was not, was very looked down upon, but nonetheless.
we do what we do. We do what we got to do.
Yeah.
What were, so we're near, let's say we're at like year 3 or year 2 to year 3, which is around the time when you moved to Austin from Athens, where a PhD program was. Where were you kind of envisioning your career going at that point? Because if I recall correctly, you went into the PhD program thinking, I want to be a professor, teach and mentor, that kind of thing, do some research. So how was your view shifting over those years of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So like I said, my first year I was a teaching assistant. I taught undergrad classes basically for my professor. He was supervising me. I loved it. My second year, I switched into a research position, and I hated it. Like, it was, I envisioned research in a really sexy way. Like, I'm going to have a research question. I'm going to build surveys and interviews to like do this with my participants. And so I had another external job working for a nonprofit company. They were kind of political. They worked with the military population, and they essentially did this like lifestyle survey. And so it's a very, it was actually probably my favorite research experience, but we surveyed a bunch of military families and answered research questions that I was really interested in a way that was like felt like a direct translation. What is the military life like? What are the challenges? Like, right? And we asked the people those questions, and it felt like clean, and I understood what was going on, and it was the experience with research that I expected. But in the PhD program, essentially I was a data miner, right? Like, I looked at the variables that we had on this data set that was collected years ago, and I'm trying to come up with some statistical analysis that is significant, and then, answer a question that I supposedly had, right? It felt like we were retrofitting data to these research questions that I didn't really fucking care about. And so I was like, okay, I had that experience year 2.
So did that kind of put a bad taste in your mouth in terms of research?
Yeah, I was just like, this isn't what I thought it was. Like, why? I thought it would be, it just wasn't what I wanted it to feel like. It didn't comport with my expectations. It left a bad taste in my mouth. It feels like in some ways it like pulled back the curtains. I saw behind the curtains of like research and academia, and I was like, this can't be what it is. This just has to be this place. Like, I'm gonna go work somewhere else and see if this is how research really is. So I got a job at UT and here in Austin in a research role. I wasn't like a primary researcher.
And this
But
was
I worked
after
with
your coursework was completed, right?
Yeah,
Right. And so
finished my
then you
coursework.
moved out of Athens down to Austin.
Yep, got out of Dodge. I don't know if this is true, but this is how I make sense of it in retrospect. Like, I needed to see if that was how all institutions were, or if that was just like my one experience at Georgia. Because like I said, I had this experience at Texas Tech with my cute research there. And then I had this experience with nonprofit, and both of those I liked. My experience with Georgia was not what I thought. So I thought, I need to go see another R1 institution and see what's up at their labs. Go work in another lab for a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, this sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. And for lots of reasons, I had felt kind of burned by the academic institution in my clinical work. And so at that point I was like, fuck it. Like, I'm going back to the basics. I know what I like to do. I like to work with people. So I just got myself a job at some clinic and decided I was done with research.
Yeah. And you were still a student at UGA at this time. And had you started your dissertation? Was that in your head at all at that point?
Yeah, that's a whole chapter. So the abstract of this chapter is that I worked for this nonprofit. I collected the data every year. I had a couple years of data that this nonprofit institution was going to let me use for my dissertation. I wrote a whole prospectus on it and failed. They failed me. So the prospectus, I don't know, means like it's essentially your proposal. And if you pass your proposal, that means they think it's a good enough idea, and then you can do the rest of your dissertation. Well, my committee didn't like my proposal. I didn't pass. There were some issues with the data that they found. And so I went and defended my prospectus, failed, and they told me they wanted me to use this other data set that they had collected. And cue in the resentments and the letdowns and the I'm not good enough.
Yeah, I remember that period of life, and you came across to me as like, I don't know, you were done with it. You felt like uncomfortable there. You felt like you weren't in your own skin or something.
Yeah. I mean, there were a few factors. Number one, I did not like the research experience. That didn't feel congruent with what I wanted to do as a researcher. Number two, when I did try to like do my own thing with this data that I had collected and answer my own research questions, it didn't feel good enough. And then there was this whole other part. So this is a clinical PhD. You get a research PhD in human development and family science, but as marriage and family therapy students, we worked in clinic doing clinical work and under clinical supervision. And that was a whole different stab wound. I remember vividly defending my theory of therapy, which is like this model that we work from. Like, some therapists do CBT, some therapists do narrative therapy. I did this weird one that not a lot of people did, based in like symbolic interactionism. And it's a hard theory to defend because it's not very concrete like CBT, right? Or like, you don't have steps 1, 2, 3. It's more yeah, it's hard to measure, hard to operationalize and defend. And I did it. I could have easily written a paper on, narrative family therapy and been fine. But again, I'm defiant. And I was like, no, this is actually what I do. Like, so anyway, that wasn't cool with the clinical side of things.
And that was
And I
happening
was
around the
also
same time, right?
same time, yeah,
Okay.
around year two, between year 1 and 2 into year 2, and my last semester at the 2.5 mark, I was seeing clients. I did this weird thing in therapy called financial therapy, where I co-led sessions or meetings with clients with financial problems with a student from the financial planning department. And I had done this in my master's program. I loved it. I still love it. But uh, I might be misremembering this, Matt. I think you were around at that point. So if you have other memories to add, please feel free. But I would get in a fight with a disagreement with my practicum professor about the clothes I would wear.
I remember some of that. Not you
Mhm.
specifically, but the general conversation.
Yeah. And so I would just a story to kind of highlight this experience. I was working with a very poor uh, couple. They were both people of color, and they were very poor, like low SES. Um, and I refused to wear the suit and tie, right? I wasn't going to be another tie or suit telling them what to do. And so I would dress down on purpose. And my professor made me write a paper on why I did that. And essentially, it was not approved. So I failed practicum, which as a clinical MFT like student, you don't fucking fail practicum as long as you have clients, as long as you're like acting ethically, showing up for your clients. Like it's not something that you fail. And so that was the nail in the coffin for me. Like the research stuff wasn't what I wanted it to be. Um, the the yeah, the clinical wasn't what I wanted it to be. It felt acutely. It was a sharp pain that was like, I don't belong here. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not good enough for this. And I cannot be successful because it's like not who I am, does not fit into this. I'm a round peg, whatever, trying to be put into a square, whatever that saying is. And I felt it acutely that semester that I failed practicum. So I decided that I was going to go to another institution to see if the research stuff was, just Georgia or if it was kind of across the board. And I didn't have a great experience there either.
Right.
And
And so, and that
it was
was
a,
the, sorry, that was the one in
mm-hmm,
Austin, right? So
mm-hmm,
Q Alley moving to Austin, still
yeah,
in the PhD program technically,
yep,
but
yep,
not there physically.
yep. Yeah, I was enrolled in dissertation hours, which means like you don't have to be in class. You're supposed to be writing your dissertation, but you're still a student there. I think they call it, uh, what do they call it? Where you're like a PhD candidate
Oh,
at that
ABD,
point.
yeah, PhD
ABD.
candidate, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Okay, so you're
so
in
whatever, they let
Austin.
me. Yep,
Sorry, yeah, you're in Austin. You did the research thing at UT. You got out of that, and then you started working at that clinic in substance abuse treatment. Is that right?
yep, yep. That's right. Yeah, substance abuse treatment, rehab. Yep. And at that point, that was so. This is crazy. So, I was making, I think, like $38,000 a year as a research assistant in UT, which was good. I was like, damn,
Better
that's
than a lot of grad students.
yeah, like I'm rich. I've made it. I'll stay in this salary forever. I went to an entry level clinical position making more that did not require a PhD, as long as I had a provisional license, which means I like went to my master's program and graduated and got like this license, I was making more money. And I was like, what have I been doing this whole time? Like, why am I
Right.
not doing this? Um,
Do you mind sharing like the
yeah,
range of what you were making?
yeah. So so I started um, at UT. I was either like 36 or 38.5, something like that, below 40. And my clinical position started me at 45, around 45 a year. Um, so again, I was like, God, I've made it. Like, I'm rich.
Right.
I can stay here forever and be happy. Um, I guess so. But then, yeah, after I became fully licensed, again, not necessary. Like, you don't need a PhD to become fully licensed in this clinical position. They bumped me up to over 50 a year. And so I had this realization, like, why am I trying to work in academia and research? I was a sketchy little bitch too, and I would like look up my professors' salaries, and like the other research people at the university, and I saw a path in which, like, if I stayed in industry, I was going to be making more money than them if I just stayed
Right.
on this track that I had kind of
Like
carved
in
out for
industry,
myself,
meaning being a therapist in like
being
a,
a therapist,
yeah,
rehab.
outside of yeah. So
Yeah,
how long
not
did you
even a
stay?
well-paying part of. Yeah,
Right. How long did you stay at that clinic? Like I'm thinking
yeah,
like how many years did you do the clinic work before you got into some kind of management or supervisory position?
yeah. Okay, so my role. So keep in mind, I'm doing my dissertation at the same time that
Mm,
I'm in this clinical
that's
world.
right. Yeah.
So I start off as an intern level therapist. I was there for almost 2 years because I had to finish my full licensure, and it takes about 2 years to do that. So I was in the intern provisionally licensed clinical role for 2 years. Got immediately got promoted to a clinical director role. Um,
That's a
which
jump.
if you, yeah, I had already been taking on like lead therapist stuff.
Yeah.
They were giving me these things to do because I was just the kind of person, like, I wanted to do more. I was never content with just my job description. I was like, let me invent groups that, I think we can do a better job at this community group and whatever. And they loved it, right? Because it's a not a very well resourced industry. And so when
Mm,
someone comes in with excitement to do more and better, they're like, go for it. Like, they're all tired and burnt out. And so I was just this young green therapist that was excited to have someone appreciate the work that I was doing,
yeah.
and I loved it. So yeah, I got promoted pretty quickly to a clinical director role, and I was very green. Like, my supervisor, my boss that hired me, knew that, and so she gave me a lot of mentoring and coaching and taught
That's
me how to
awesome.
be a clinical director. Yeah, and then I did that for about 2 years. Um,
Do you mind sharing the salary range of that promotion?
yeah, yeah. So I believe when I started, I did like a 3 month stint as a quote lead therapist, like on paper, and then did the clinical director. So I went up to 65,000 a year as the lead clinician, and then clinical director started at 75.
Nice.
And then something that I've been telling people, like, in industry, you get annual raises. So you're like bumped up 10% every January or whenever it is that they do your annual review. Um, so yeah, I started out at 75 in the clinical director role, got some raises, ended around 85.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
how many
So
years were you
then,
at that clinic? Sorry, from
yeah.
that to the director role?
So all in all, well, I got one more promotion after that
Oh,
before I
okay.
quit. But all together, I was there for like almost 6 years, I think, 5.5, 6 years. Um, yeah. So after my clinical director, I basically got promoted to a regional director of clinical operations position, um, where I was making 100. I ended that job at 133 a year.
Awesome. Which is way
Yeah,
more than assistant professors make.
yeah. Even professors with grants that like
Yeah,
bust their ass in the grant rat race, like that was on par with the salary of them. And I just graduated in 2019. So like I think it was 2019 and then in 20 at the end of 2020 or maybe the beginning of 2021. No, it was definitely 2021 is when I got that regional jump
that's right.
to the six figure.
And then
So,
that was the role you had when we were in Austin. Is that correct?
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So to
Yep.
just wrap up that period,
Yep.
when did you finish your dissertation? Was that when you were clinical director?
Mhm.
Damn.
Yep.
Um,
2019. Yep.
yeah, and so just for backstory for everyone else, we had to do the years of coursework, which you did quicker than normal.
Mhm.
Then you
Mhm.
moved. You had to do a year of internship, which you ended up getting. You didn't
No,
do
if
the
you
internship?
recall, I dropped MFT.
Oh shit, that's right. I
Fucking
forgot
dropped it
about
like it's
that.
hot.
That's
Yeah.
right, and that was drama. Okay, yeah, all that's coming back
Yeah,
to me
cuz
now.
yep.
Yeah,
So, yeah, okay, so the backstory on that, they were giving me shit about my clinical model. And I was fighting it like tooth and nail. Like this is the actual therapy that I do. Here's my defense of it. Here's the research. Like here's all the books on it. This is a thing. People do this model of therapy. I do this model of therapy. And they were like, nope, it's not good enough. And so I was like, ah, well, fuck this. I'm not doing it then. I just like, I don't know
right.
what happened, but I just like opted out. I was just like, never mind. I think someone told me that was an option. And I had like never considered that I could just say, no thanks, never mind,
Yeah,
then I'll just drop this. It was total paradigm shift for me. So yeah, so I didn't have to do an internship. I just,
that's right.
well, yeah, I chose not to do an internship and I chose to not um, have that on my degree plan, which didn't matter
Right,
because like in all the tangible ways I took this fundamentals of supervision course, right, which gives me the ability to be a supervisor. um, it's just my, whatever, my degree is human development and family science, just
right.
like every other person in that degree.
You just
So
didn't
anyway.
have the emphasis on couple and family therapy
Mhm.
line, which ironically, I think you probably have more therapy hours than you're in the
Everyone else that
top two or
graduated.
three of our contemporaries, if not the number one spot, I would think,
Mhm.
based on how long you were at
Right.
that clinic, which is
Yeah.
ironic. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
so
I think it's an
sorry, go ahead.
important note too. Like I did the coursework, and so I have all of that on my transcripts. It's just my degree doesn't say emphasis in, and so it's weird. Like it's kind of worked out really well for me, but because your job, employers in the industry, they don't care. Like
Right,
if I'm not being a professor in an MFT program, then it doesn't matter.
right,
I like all the tangible things that you can take from that. I got because I did the coursework.
right. And
Um,
just to give people perspective, like if we were psychologists, you do have to get like a PhD or a PsyD or
mhm.
whatever. I don't remember the term, like terminal degree. But
Mm-hmm.
for marriage and family therapists, master's is the terminal degree, and so anything,
Yep.
any education after that is just extra.
Yep.
Um, okay, so that brings us to you had the regional supervisor job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, sorry, what was the name? You didn't call it regional supervisor, did you?
Director of clinical operations.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Um, and so you were, I guess that's not a C-suite job, but you were pretty high up in the rankings in that company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how many layers were above you at that point?
Yeah. So I reported directly to the regional CEO, and the regional CEO reported directly to the national CEO of the whole
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. So
Yeah, so you're flying close to
next,
the sun.
yeah, yeah, the next promotion for me would have been CEO, but I didn't, that the job didn't really
Yeah,
sound like something I wanted to do. I wanted to be more clinical.
for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
The CEO is more like marketing and business and financials, and that stuff makes me want to drink. So,
Yeah. So
yeah.
what over the years, or not even over the years, but what helped you reach this place professionally? Because just a couple years prior, you were like a teaching assistant making like 30 grand a year. And then fast forward, what, 4 or 5 years or something like that, you're in a much
Mm-hmm.
different position professionally. So what helped you make that shift?
Yeah. I wish I could say like I was so insightful and thoughtful, but um, I had to do something different, or I was already on a spiral of like depression and anxiety. I was taking anxiety meds, like antidepressants. I could not keep doing it. So I had to do something different.
Mm.
Um, and I went back to my roots essentially, and I knew that I loved doing therapy work. And so I just took the first opportunity that came to do therapy work. Um, and I white knuckled my way through the dissertation. It was not enjoyable. I would describe it as traumatic and exploitative. Um, but yeah, I'm sorry, I don't really have like a profound answer. Like I had to do it out of desperation to
Yeah,
not kill myself.
yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. And it just, I lucked out. I found a place and I found an amazing supervisor that was willing to coach me up and believed in me and liked the way that I thought and appreciated me. And don't get me wrong, like it had its shit too, but that shit was something I was willing to take because I liked the work so much.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I hear a couple things. I hear you found a mentor who the trade of pros and cons was a net positive.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and they helped you like throughout your career progression. And your mentor when you became clinic director was also your mentor at the regional level, correct?
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
right.
She also got elevated. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And shout out to her. Her name is Rachel. Like we dominated and
yeah,
everyone loved us. And I don't know why, but people loved us. Um, and we were successful in a lot of ways. We definitely like had areas for improvement, but in the company there was like between 11 and at our lowest point like 7 or 8 facilities nationwide. So we represented the one in Central Texas. But yeah, even when we like didn't hit our metrics, like people just liked us. And I know it's really simple and like not very profound to say, but like that goes a long way. I
yeah,
never had that experience
yeah,
in academia where like even if you're not performing at the level that other people expect, like they like you and they
mm-hmm.
think you're smart and they tell you that you're pretty, you know.
Yeah. Likability is
Um,
important for sure. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that or where you were, but
The second thing that I heard from you talking was that you did something you loved.
mm-hmm,
Um, and like getting back into like quote the dirt, so to speak, and doing like substance
mm-hmm,
use work, rehabilitation, um, stuff that you're passionate about. Do you think you
mm-hmm.
would have ended up the same? I don't. Do you think you would have had the same trajectory if maybe like the clinical aspect was different, or maybe you just took like a random desk job?
You know, I thought about taking a random desk job for a little while, um, doing something like uh, I don't even remember. I was thinking about quality assurance. Like I really like auditing, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to tell people what to do. So I was like, oh, if I do like quality assurance stuff. Um, but yeah, I just like at the end of the day, if it doesn't translate back to something that means something for somebody or for
Mm-hmm.
myself, I find myself bored with it. Or if it's not challenging in some way that um, makes me think differently or learn more, yeah, I didn't want to do it. And I know that that's like really privileged that I had, for whatever reason, like the world, I lucked out and that I did that master's degree, and I just kind of like followed my heart. And when shit hit the fan, I knew to go back to those roots. There's like something innate, and I knew this is weird to say, but like the things that I learned in my PhD, like discipline and seeing things through and really getting into the weeds, I took like I think that's why I became so successful in that substance abuse world, because I knew how to work Excel spreadsheets where most therapists don't. I knew how to interpret data. I knew how to be a public speaker because we had to teach in the PhD, and so there were things that I did take that helped me be successful from that PhD program. Um, and I liked it. Like, right. Like I had a bad experience, but there were things that I took from that PhD program that I loved, and I somehow manipulated them to work for me in a way that I can't quite articulate.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
You've. So I'll finish my point, and then we'll take a turn in the story. You've
Okay.
always struck me as someone who works super hard whenever you have passion on the subject, and you talked about um, never being always being curious and like looking for the next thing and like pushing into the next direction, even if it's not like doesn't fit the status quo,
Mm-hmm.
or like the happy PR message that a research lab might want to focus on or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so leading up to today, now you've taken one final step in your career, and now you're in private
Mm-hmm.
practice, correct?
Yeah, private practice and consulting. I also do teach a little bit at some universities, but it's
Oh, I didn't
clinical.
know that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I am self-employed, I guess. I quit my big wig job for lots of COVID really fucked me up. Like
Yeah.
that was really hard. We were like a hospital level of care, uh, so it was really intense. But so super burnt out and decided that I didn't want to be there anymore. And yeah, doing private practice, doing a little bit of clinical consulting in the operations world for treatment facilities. Um, and then, yeah, I teach practicum and a couple classes here and there.
Scaring
Weird.
the shit out of new therapists, I'm sure.
Yep. I'm super nice to them. I tell them that all their theories are valid and good.
Oh, that's great. That's
But yeah, my salary is comparable to what I was making in for profit industry. So
How many hours a week do you think you work right now? I know it varies, but
it varies. Let's look at this week. I can tell you exactly. Um, 4, 5, 6, 7. 19 hours this week of
19 like
scheduled.
clinical hours.
Hmm.
Not bad.
Yep. And that includes my practicum, and I do individual supervision for like provisionally licensed therapists in Texas. But yeah, I am working half the hours, making the same amount of money. Now, yeah, like there's some next week is going to be way busier. But here I am. Just,
That's awesome.
yeah,
So, to start the last part of our conversation, if you were able
yeah.
to talk to like master's level Allie today, like what would you be saying to her in terms of like future direction, her career, the things that plague her mind at the time. We can do an empty chair technique if you want.
Yeah. I would say to past Allie, who you are now. Well, okay, who you are in 2013 is going to be so different than who you think. Like, you're going to grow up to be something totally different than what you could ever imagine. And the things that you find meaning in now quickly become meaningless. And you find new meaning and deeper meaning in other things. Not to say that life becomes meaningless,
For sure.
but meaning shifts. And I think what I would say to PhD Allie is that not all of this will be lost on you. You are learning really important life lessons that don't have to do with anything on the curriculum in this PhD program. You're learning skills, you're learning discipline, you're learning ways of being, you're learning how to think critically and be open-minded, but also disciplined in that kind of thinking. And also, I would validate for PhD Allie that that system is exploitative. That's not crazy. It's not something that I'm making up in my mind.
Yeah. I know there are going to be grad students listening who resonate with quite a bit of that. What advice or takeaways or quick hacks or anything that you can think of that you think people would find value in, like from your journey?
I think when you're in it, when you're in the shit show of grad school, there are parts of you that are screaming certain things. What, like for me, it was like, you don't belong here, you're not good enough. You like, what are you even, why are you even doing this? I wish I would have listened to those loud parts in a way that they didn't have to scream. So that way there could be space for those other shy and scared and vulnerable parts. I was just very reactive to those loud parts of me. And if I would have just taken a minute to take a step back and like really look at what I was doing and what I was getting myself into and the kind of gravity of that, I had no idea. It's like you can't see the forest through the trees when you're in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm kind of speaking to like zooming out, and yeah, hearing those softer, shyer, scareder voices, parts of you that are too scared to stand up and say like, I'm not fucking doing this.
Yeah.
Or I'm doing it my way, and realizing that you do have power in that. Well, maybe, hopefully you do. I think there are programs that absolutely don't allow that. But yeah, I think the other thing that I would say is like learn your value, because all of us have value in those institutions and in those systems. I think academia sets you up to compare yourself with others or to look at others around you and what they're publishing and how many they're publishing and what journals they're publishing in and the rank of their impact factor and how many grants are you working on, whatever. And like that, your value is not tied to those things. And there is value in the program that are not those things. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling with that because I don't know that I would have been able to hear that when I was in grad school, but I know that I needed to hear I wish someone would have forced me to hear that.
Yeah. And I think, I the part that you said before about the loud parts, I really connected with that. And the first thing that came to my mind was like do or die. And that was kind of like the feeling I had the whole time. And, it was a little bit of a thrill.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it was like there was a quiet part of me that was like, maybe I don't want to be doing this. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until we had our son that I really like
Mm-hmm.
listened to that part at all. And that's what makes me go back to like the cult kind of language, is because
Yep.
part of being in a cult is that you don't know it's a cult when you're in it, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's like voluntary engagement in a delusion of some kind. And
Mm-hmm.
that's probably like a little hyperbolic in terms of describing academia, to play devil's advocate, but yeah, if only we could hear those quiet parts when we're in the thick of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that quiet part of you that's like, I don't know if I really want to do this. Even if I would have listened to that part while I was in grad school, I probably still would have finished it. Um, but there it feels like sad that I didn't give voice to that or give air to that in the mix of it. Because that part of me now, I'm like, oh shit, like why didn't I listen to that? I could have responded so differently, um, and more compassionately, which is ultimately what I needed in grad school. Like I needed to just be okay. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think I don't know if this fits anywhere, Matt, but I wanted to say that the idea of like the financial guilt behind working in industry. Um,
What do you mean? Can you say more?
yeah, so like I I have friends that finish their PhD and they're in academia, and I feel like there is this thing that all people do where we have this like money is such a taboo topic and we don't want to talk about it with each other. And I don't know if you've like read anything or into the like financial transparency in the workplace. Um, but I have a very close friend who we talk about finances openly. Um, and because I kind of shared with her industry standard and we compared it to academic standard, like it's not an exact comparison, but um, I think on both ends there's like guilt and shame related to finances in academia and in industry and crossing those worlds. So I don't know really
Mm-hmm.
what my point is, but I do want to say like I think that there's something behind the financial part of being paid what you're worth and knowing your value. And I'm sad to say it, but like industry values PhDs, I think, more than academia does. Um, and like I like to think about it like I spent many years on my brain and many dollars on my brain, and I have to assert myself to be paid or compensated fairly, and I still like have to override that guilt sometimes.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that fits or what that's about, but I feel like that's an important thing that I just want to put out there.
I think that makes a ton of sense. And honestly, uh, I could not have said it as eloquently or fully, but that kind of thing is partially why I asked you if you'd be willing to provide your income range for like each of the steps
Yep.
up that you had in your career, because I think I had no idea when I was in the PhD program what my options were outside of academia. And
Mm-hmm.
some of that is on me for not like, doing my own research or whatever, or not having more of an extensive social network that would have like fed me that information or something. But some of it
That's
is
how you got
like
sucked into the cult.
I did. I mean, and
You were
and
sucked
it's
in.
it's self-reinforcing in that, our professors don't benefit from us going to industry and getting these high-paying jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Um The other thing I wanted to say was thank you for sharing that. I think that's really helpful. And to go back to your story about you and your friend, to give context, I think I know who you're talking about. And so she's a teaching professor, teaches at an online university, and full time gig. And your salaries are pretty far apart. And she may work more hours than you, or you than her. I don't know the split of that, but and that difference was what you were saying in terms of like there's shame and guilt kind of on both ends. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Like I ask myself, why, like I don't deserve more than her or less than her, and she doesn't deserve more or less than me. Like we have literally the same exact degree. Our interests are different, and um, yeah, I guess I'm just advocating for like financial transparency in
Yeah.
academia because you in grad school you look at your professors and you're like, oh my god, they're so awesome and cool and I want to be just like them, and you idolize them and you romanticize the position, and then you realize, oh, they're making $80,000 a year, which is what I realized when I had left Athens and came and worked in Austin. Like, what the fuck? Like, I am making more money than my professor who has 50 more years experience on me. Like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had this moment where I was like, I don't deserve this. I'm not worth this. This is a scam and everyone's going to find me out. And so, yeah, I still have to do work on like, no, I'm worth this, and everyone is worth this. And it's not necessarily tied to a dollar amount, right? Like, I know therapists that work really hard, long hours, and they make less money in private practice because it's important to them that they provide services that are affordable in a different way or
Mm-hmm.
accessible in a different way than the things that I provide. But it's not like a one-to-one direct value judgment. Like that person, maybe makes less money than me, but they're doing important work that they feel is um, they compensating them in a way that they feel content or fulfilled with, right? Um, so I think I'm kind of talking in circles, but it's one of my things. If I were to go die on a hill, it would be a financial transparency hill,
Mm-hmm.
um, in many ways. But yeah,
Well,
so
I appreciate you being open to share your numbers.
yeah,
I think, obviously not everyone listening to this is going to be in a clinical realm. Um,
yeah,
I think it's probably disproportionately clinical just because I've made some content about therapy stuff over the years that probably attracted some eyeballs from clinicians.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, and the job I just got is essentially an assistant professor salary,
mm-hmm.
not clinical at all for like a fraction of the workload.
Yep,
Um, and so, you know, opportunities are out there, and on average,
mm-hmm.
I think I read something that its industry makes on average 30% more, and obviously that'll vary a lot by the field
Yeah,
that you're in. But
yeah,
but
yep.
yeah,
Um, I work with professors in different disciplines in my practice, and they describe a very similar experience. So I don't know. Yeah, the pay, the work, the cult feeling. Um, yeah. So without saying too much, I think other fields will be able to relate to it.
yeah,
um,
yeah. The workload. I mean, I my mentor, he made sure we all worked pretty hard in the lab. He also worked pretty hard, and I remember not envying him because he would be on campus later than
yeah.
me, and he had young kids, and I was like, ooh, man, that
Mhm.
it's a tough
Yep.
grind.
I
Um,
basically watched the decline of the health of my major professor happen right in front of me.
yeah, I remember
Um,
that. That was hard.
That was, yeah, that was hard to watch. And I don't know. I don't want to live my life like that. And cheers to the people that do, because if they can grind like
Sure.
that, like hats off. But I'm not, I can't live like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We are agreed on that. Okay. Let us. So, any other. I think one of the things that I wanted to get at was like practical tips for folks who are currently in grad school. They're thinking of their professional future. Uh,
mhm.
I think most folks in grad school aren't completely determined whether they're going to go into industry or stay in academia, and so they're wanting to keep their options open. In listening to you, there were a couple things that stood out in terms of practical ways to get ahead for whatever your future profession could be.
Mhm.
One of them was, you know, applying yourself. You learned all these new skills in your PhD program that set you apart from other clinical faculty who did not get a PhD. You talked about the discipline, and you talked about the mentor you found. And I want to give you maybe
Mhm.
more credit than you had mentioned before on that. And I think attracting a mentor like that is kind of like a networking skill, right? And I think you're a very adept networker.
Oh,
And I see how you form professional relationships, and I kind of like look up to you, and I'm like, okay, that's
oh,
I'm gonna
thanks,
be
Matt.
suave and slick like Allie, like in a good way. Um, so how do you view? Let's just take networking. So how do you view
Okay.
professional networking? How did this particular relationship with your mentor blossom? Anything in that area?
That is so interesting to hear you say that. First of all, thank you. I don't see myself that way. I hate networking.
Hmm.
I hate it, hate it, hate it. Like, we have these little conferences once a month in Austin for professionals in a certain industry. And I used to have to go for my job, and I hated it. I used to say, like, I need a handler at those things to introduce me to people, because I see myself as like very shy in situations like that. But I know that I'm good at one on one. And I know that um, people think I'm smart. So if I can like present at a conference and allow people to like relate to me as they will, I do better in that way than versus like trying to walk up to a table and be like, "Hello, my name is Allie and I own a private practice and send me your referrals."
Yeah.
I do. I know that it's my strength to be one on one or like one in a small group versus a big situation. But I say this to the therapists that I work with when I'm supervising them. Like, at the end of the day, we know that the number one predictor of good therapy is that your client thinks that well, number one, they like you, and number two, that you guys are aligned in your shared goals.
Hmm.
So if you can, like, that, I feel like translates to all relationships, business relationships and networking, friendships, family relationships. Like, if you can like the person in front of you, find something to like about them, because that's true. Like, with some business relationships, there are people that I generally don't like, but I find one thing I like about them at least, and I focus on that, and I try to get them to like me and just be a human. I'm not
Hmm.
trying to be like Dr. DeGraff that's an expert. Like, no, I drop the F bomb with my network people. Like, I am just who I am. I think people are drawn to that kind of authenticity.
Yeah.
And even when I'm nervous, like, I have another mentor. His name's Sam. Like, I met him one time at a like little networking thing for a new facility that opened, and I was like, I'm so fucking nervous, Sam. And he's like my boss, right? Like, he's also one of my bosses. Like, dude, I'm sweating. I hate it here. Like, um, so even when it's like you know, the playful, like, I'm nervous, I'm just acknowledging that I don't like feel comfortable in these in these situations, people like that because I think we can all relate to what that feels like. And so I don't know, I think I'm kind of rambling. Number one, like the people, find something that you like about them and be likable. Number two, find something that's like a shared common goal. Like, I love it when therapists come to me and they're like, I want supervision because I really want to learn about this particular model of therapy and I love experiential. And I'm like, yes, I align with them immediately, right?
Mm-hmm.
So find something that is a shared goal or a shared ambition. And then, like, just be authentically you and let people relate to you as they wish. And everyone can sense when you're trying to put on this business facade. And so I just choose to like opt out of that. I'm not going to play that game. I'm just going to be me and hopefully you like me, but if not, like, that's cool too. We can just focus on our shared ambitions.
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
And I think that that's the success in my relation. I have like two or three, really kind of two mentors, and I don't try to like sugarcoat it or show them, who I want them to think I am. Like, I show them all of my nerdiness and how I geek out on this projects that we're working on or whatever our shared goal is. And I also let them see this other part of me that's like insecure and like, I do need your mentorship. I do, like, I'll tell my mentors like, hey, I'm calling because I need you to tell me that I'm special and pretty and smart. Like, I just put that out there to them because I think that particularly with mentors, everyone likes to feel like you're asking for their help, right? Like, I do a lot of work around with clients around like, how do you feel when someone comes and asks you for help? You feel special and important and smart and like, but you refuse to go ask anyone else for help because you think it means that you're not good enough. Well, do you think that the people that ask you for help are not good enough? No, you like that. Like, you think that they're actually smarter and more thoughtful. And so I have no shame in saying like, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I need you to teach it to me. Like, I feel small and dumb. And then they're like, absolutely, I would love to help you. Because that's what good mentors want to do. And so if we present to our mentors like, I am so smart and good, will you be my mentor? They're going to be like, what? Like, so I guess that's what I mean by like being your authentic self, and meaning that you have permission to have all of those parts of you be there in that relationship. So yeah, I think I'm soapboxing, but
that makes so much sense to me. And I think I am probably an introvert, and I am slow to warm up to people, generally speaking. And I think my default and the default of many people is to kind of put on that fake representation and go through maybe 3 or 5 professional connections and build that kind of like lukewarm relationship with. And I think that what you're saying makes way more sense. It's that if you bring your authentic self to the table and you just accept that there are going to be some people who don't like you and some people you don't like, and you don't have to be friends with everybody. And frankly, those 3 to 5 lukewarm relationships that fake Matt might be okay with, they're not going to be the ones to be the cheerleader for me to get a job or a promotion, right? It's going to be the like 2 people out of 50 that you met, but those 2 people love you for who you are and they want to see you succeed. And so I feel like if I was to try to pull something out, it's like, be your authentic self and just keep looking, because eventually there will be people who really connect with you, whether it's like a mentee or mentor relationship or an equals relationship. And those are the professional relationships that will serve you in the long run and be satisfying. I mean, yeah.
They're more meaningful, right? Because you get to be your whole vulnerable self authentically. And the relationships that I have this crafted version of myself, like, it's exhausting and I don't like myself in that. Like, why would I expect someone else to like me in that? And as scary as it sounds, like, Brene Brown is right. Like, if you can be vulnerable, people want to be in relationship with you because it's brave and courageous, and people are drawn to that. And cheers, Brene Brown.
Cheers, Brene.
Thanks.
She's great. Well, we are running out of time. Is there anything on your mind that we didn't cover? Any takeaways or any funny stories or one-liners, Alley-isms?
Damn, I don't think I have any Alley-isms that I haven't already. You probably have heard. I have a funny story I want to tell.
Go for it.
All right, so it's August 2013, and I am bartending at this bar, and I'm also starting my PhD program, and I see this bar back at the bar. He's working there too, and it's Matt Carlson.
Yep.
And I don't remember, did we see each other first in orientation, or I think it was at the bar first?
It might have been at the bar first, because it was right out the gate that we both started working there. And we had no idea each other were going to be working there.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're both working in this bar, and then we were like, oh, you're in my PhD program. You're in my PhD program. What are the odds of we both are working but Athens has a whole bar scene. It's not there's probably 100 bars downtown. What are the odds that we're both in the same bar and we're both in the same PhD program, which is also super competitive and rare. And it's funny. Yeah, that's my funny story. That was funny. Small world. Yeah, and now we're still friends, almost 10 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember one element of working at that bar was I felt an element of maybe secrecy of maybe we don't publicize the fact that we have these side jobs in addition to our assistantships and our classes and those are fun
Same,
times.
Dude. It was supposed to be my own little secret because I had gotten so much shit for bartending in my master's program. They're you're out late. How are you? So yeah. But no, I think, Matt, what you're doing with this podcast is really cool. And I wish I would have found something like this while I was in grad school. So thank you for doing this from past me and future generations of grad students. I think you're doing something really cool and meaningful. So thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
You're special.
Thank you. If listeners want to follow up with you somehow, would you be open to that? And if so, how would you recommend people reach out to you?
Yeah. Well, I don't have a Facebook or business Instagram page, but I need to ask you how to do that. But yeah, my email, you can find me online. My website is DeGraff.com.
That's DEGRAFF therapy.com.
Yep.
Okay.
That's me. All my contact info's on there. My cell phone's on there. You can text me. But yeah, otherwise, to be determined on if and when I get a professional Facebook, Instagram, Twitter hip or whatever.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me, Allie. This was a great conversation. Dr. Allie DeGraff. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carlson.
Talk to you next time.
See ya.
Bye. Folks, thank you for listening to the Grad School Sucks podcast, where we believe that your career after grad school should rock. I hope you got a lot of value out of today's episode. Allie is one of my favorite people, and I've loved watching and learning from her career trajectory over the past few years. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, and write a review. If you know someone who could benefit from listening to this podcast, send them today's episode and let them know why they should check it out. As always, I'm your host, Matt Carlson, and I look forward to bringing you another great interview next week. See you all then.